Picture this. You are a 12-year-old boy named Darius, standing naked and trembling on a marble platform in the heart of Constantinople. The year is 1453 AD, and the morning sun streams through silk curtains as Byzantine nobles circle you like vultures examining fresh carrion. Your wrists bear the rope marks from your journey here, sold by your own father for 3 silver coins and a promise that his remaining children might survive the coming winter. The air thick with incense and something far more sinister. The scent of desperation masked by perfumed oils. Your young body shivers, not from cold, but from the weight of hungry eyes evaluating every inch of your flesh, as if you were livestock at market. The sound of silk slippers against polished stone mingles with whispered negotiations that will determine whether you live as a plaything for emperors or die forgotten in some palace dungeon. Your heart pounds against your ribs as you realize you are about to enter a world where your screams will be mistaken for music, where your tears will be currency, and where your childhood ended the moment those silver coins changed hands. This is not a story of adventure or heroic conquest. This is the untold horror of male concubines throughout history. Young boys and men whose bodies became battlegrounds for power, whose innocence was sacrificed on altars built from imperial ambition and aristocratic appetite. These forgotten victims of history's darkest chambers suffered in silence, while chroniclers wrote epic tales of military victories and political alliances, deliberately omitting the screams echoing through palace corridors and the broken bodies discarded like worn clothing. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The institution of male concubinage stretched across civilizations and continents like a plague of normalized brutality. From the harems of Ottoman sultans to the inner chambers of Chinese emperors, from the private quarters of Roman patricians to the sealed apartments of Persian shahs, young males were collected, trained, and consumed by systems that reduced human beings to sophisticated toys for the entertainment of those who wielded absolute power. Unlike their female counterparts, male concubines occupied an even more precarious position in the hierarchy of sexual slavery. They existed in a shadow world where their very existence challenged traditional concepts of masculinity and social order. Their suffering was compounded not only by physical and psychological abuse, but by the additional shame of being considered less than men in societies that prized masculine strength above all other virtues. The selection process for male concubines began in the most vulnerable corners of society. War orphans, children from desperately poor families, and boys captured during military campaigns formed the primary sources for this human trafficking network that spanned centuries and continents. Slave traders developed sophisticated systems for identifying and acquiring the most desirable candidates, looking for specific physical characteristics that would appeal to their wealthy clientele. Beauty was the primary criterion, but it was a very specific type of beauty that these merchants sought. Young boys with delicate features, smooth skin, and graceful movements commanded the highest prices in markets, from Baghdad to Beijing. The ideal male concubine possessed an almost feminine beauty, while retaining enough masculine characteristics to satisfy the complex psychological needs of their future owners. The training process that transformed innocent children into skilled concubines represented perhaps the most systematic destruction of human dignity ever devised by civilized societies. Once purchased, these boys were taken to specialized facilities where they underwent months or even years of preparation designed to remake them entirely according to their purchaser's specifications. Physical transformation came first. Boys destined for the highest levels of imperial service often underwent castration, a procedure that served multiple purposes in the minds of their owners. Eunuch concubines could never father children who might threaten dynastic succession. Thesing their masters without the distraction of their were believed to be more focused on Pollone's sexual desires, and they were considered safer around female members of the household. The castration process itself varied depending on the culture and time period, but it was universally brutal and frequently fatal. Byzantine practitioners developed techniques using bronze clamps and red-hot knives, while Chinese methods involved crushing the genitals with wooden mallets before cutting. Many boys died from blood loss or infection during these procedures, and those who survived were forever marked by their mutilation. But physical castration was only the beginning of their transformation. The psychological conditioning that followed was designed to break down every aspect of their individual identity and rebuild them as perfect instruments of pleasure. Boys were taught to move with fluid grace, to speak in soft tones, to anticipate their owner's needs before they were even expressed. Dance instruction formed a crucial component of their education. Male concubines were expected to perform elaborate choreographed sequences that combined artistic expression with subtle eroticism. These dances told stories of seduction and submission, of beauty offered and accepted, of bodies transformed into living art for the entertainment of their masters. Musical training accompanied the dance instruction. Concubines learned to play instruments that complemented their physical performances, creating complete sensory experiences that could transport their audiences into realms of aesthetic pleasure. The lute, the flute, and various percussion instruments became extensions of their bodies, tools for creating atmospheres of intimacy and desire. Language instruction took on particular importance for concubines destined for the highest levels of society. They were taught not only to speak eloquently, but to recite poetry, to engage in sophisticated conversation, and to demonstrate the kind of cultural refinement that would reflect well on their owner's taste and status. The most disturbing aspect of their training involved explicit instruction in sexual techniques and practices. Adult trainers, often former concubines themselves, taught these children how to pleasure their future masters using methods that would maximize their owner's satisfaction while minimizing their own agency in the encounter. These lessons began with theoretical instruction about anatomy and desire, but quickly progressed to practical demonstrations using other concubines or specially designed training devices. Boys learned to suppress their natural responses to pain and humiliation, to smile while being hurt, to express gratitude for treatment that would have been recognized as torture in any other context. The psychological manipulation employed during this training period was sophisticated and devastating. Trainers understood that complete submission could not be achieved through physical force alone. They developed techniques for breaking down the boy's sense of self-worth and replacing it with a desperate need for approval from authority figures. Isolation played a crucial role in this process. Boys were separated from anyone who might remind them of their previous lives or identities. They were given new names, often chosen to reflect their intended function, rather than their humanity. A boy named Marcus might become Pearl, emphasizing his value as an ornamental object rather than his identity as a person. Reward and punishment systems were carefully calibrated to create psychological dependence. Boys who performed well during training sessions received small luxuries, better food, or brief moments of human kindness that became precious beyond measure in their otherwise harsh existence. Those who resisted or failed to meet expectations faced punishments designed to be memorable without permanently damaging their market value. The duration of training varied depending on the intended destination and function of each concubine. Boys destined for provincial officials might complete their preparation in a matter of months, while those selected for imperial courts could spend years perfecting their skills and developing the sophisticated cultural knowledge expected at the highest levels of society. Throughout this process, The boys' original personalities were systematically erased and replaced with carefully constructed personas designed to appeal to their future owners. They learned to become whatever their masters desired, shape-shifting between roles as entertainers, counselors, decorative objects, and sexual partners depending on the situation and their owner's mood. The psychological trauma of this transformation process created lasting damage that persisted long after the training period ended. Many concubines developed what modern psychologists would recognize as complex trauma responses, including dissociation, learned helplessness, and Stockholm Syndrome-like attachments to their abusers. The marketplace where these transformed boys were finally sold operated according to rules that would have impressed medieval merchant guilds in their complexity's grand bazaar contain and brutality. Constantinople, a discrete section where human flesh was evaluated with the same clinical precision used for examining precious gems or exotic spices. Potential buyers would arrive before dawn, their identities concealed behind silk masks and flowing robes that marked their aristocratic status, while protecting their reputations from association with such transactions. Darius found himself positioned alongside dozens of other boys on that marble platform, each one representing years of systematic preparation and thousands of hours of training designed to transform children into sophisticated instruments of pleasure. The inspection process began with visual examination from a distance, buyers circling the platform like art collectors evaluating sculptures in a gallery, noting the grace of movement, the perfection of features, the subtle signs that indicated successful completion of their brutal education. Those who passed the initial visual screening faced more intimate examination. Buyers would approach individual candidates, running their hands over smooth skin to test its softness, examining teeth and eyes for signs of health, evaluating the boy's responses to touch and command. The concubines had been trained to remain perfectly still during these inspections, to smile serenely while strangers violated their personal boundaries, to demonstrate their complete submission to whatever treatment their potential owners might devise. The bidding process itself represented a fascinating intersection of commerce and cruelty. Auctioneers possessed encyclopedic knowledge of their merchandise, able to recite detailed information about each boy's training, skills, and particular specialties. They might highlight a candidate's musical abilities, his flexibility for certain physical positions, his capacity for emotional manipulation, or his resistance to various forms of physical stress. Price negotiations reflected not only the quality of individual concubines, but also broader economic and political factors. During times of war or economic uncertainty, prices for luxury slaves plummeted as even wealthy buyers focused on more essential purchases. Conversely, periods of imperial expansion and cultural prosperity saw dramatic increases in demand for the most refined and expensive concubines. The most valuable candidates were often those who combined exceptional physical beauty with rare skills or cultural knowledge. A boy who could speak multiple languages, perform complex mathematical calculations, or demonstrate mastery of philosophical concepts might command prices equivalent to entire estates. These intellectual concubines serve not only as sexual partners, but as living symbols of their owners' sophistication and cultural refinement. Regional preferences influenced market dynamics in ways that reflected broader cultural values and aesthetic sensibilities. Byzantine buyers favored pale, delicate boys who embodied classical Greek ideals of youthful beauty, while Ottoman purchasers often preferred more exotic features that suggested foreign origins and conquest. Chinese emperors developed legendary appetites for concubines who combined physical perfection with scholarly accomplishments, creating demand for boys who could compose poetry while performing acrobatic sexual positions. The transportation of purchased concubines to their final destinations represented another layer of systematic dehumanization. Wealthy buyers rarely collected their acquisitions personally, instead employing specialized handlers who understood the delicate process of relocating valuable human property without damaging their investment. These professionals developed sophisticated techniques for managing groups of traumatized children during long journeys across dangerous territories. Concubines traveled in specially designed carriages that prioritized security and concealment over comfort. The vehicles featured locked compartments, reinforced walls, and minimal ventilation to prevent escape attempts while protecting their valuable cargo from external threats. Guards accompanying these convoys understood that their primary responsibility was preserving the market value of their charges rather than ensuring their well-being or comfort. The arrival at their final destination marked the beginning of a new phase of existence that would define the remainder of their lives. Palace complexes throughout the ancient world contained specialized quarters designed specifically for housing and managing collections of male concubines. These facilities combined elements of luxury apartments, training academies, and high-security prisons, creating environments where residents lived in gilded captivity. The architecture of concubine quarters reflected the complex psychological needs of both the residents and their owners. Rooms were decorated with expensive furnishings, silk wall hangings, and artistic treasures that created an atmosphere of refined beauty while serving as constant reminders of their inhabitants' status as valuable possessions. Gardens provided spaces for exercise and contemplation, but were surrounded by high walls and staffed with guards who ensured that these moments of apparent freedom never became opportunities for actual escape. As we return to young Darius on that marble platform in Constantinople, his trembling form illuminated by morning light filtering through silk curtains, we understand that his story was not unique, but tragically common across centuries of human civilization. The institution of male concubinage reveals humanity's capacity for transforming innocence into commodity, for disguising systematic abuse as cultural refinement, for reducing children to instruments of pleasure while celebrating the sophistication of those who consumed them. The marble platforms have crumbled, the silk curtains have rotted away, and the palaces where these atrocities occurred now stand as tourist destinations, where visitors admire architectural beauty while remaining ignorant of the screams that once echoed through those ornate corridors. But the psychological patterns that enabled such systematic cruelty persist wherever power operates without accountability, wherever wealth can purchase human dignity, wherever societies choose to look away from inconvenient truths about their own foundations. These forgotten boys, sold into royal pleasure and consumed by imperial appetite, remind us that civilization's greatest achievements often rest upon foundations of unspeakable suffering. Their stories, buried beneath layers of historical silence and deliberate amnesia, demand recognition not as ancient curiosities, but as warnings about the eternal human capacity for transforming vulnerability into profit and innocence into entertainment. In remembering Darius and countless others like him, we honor not only their suffering, but our responsibility to recognize the systems of exploitation that continue to operate in our own time, disguised by different languages, but driven by the same fundamental disregard for human dignity that once filled those marble platforms with trembling children whose screams were mistaken for music, whose tears became currency, and whose broken bodies served as stepping stones to power.